Hey, how are you listening to this podcast right now?
Don't go 4 fingers deep before you record your ads, Glenn Beck. Come on, that's not. You're like, oh yeah, after a couple of Glenn Levitts, I'm gonna start. Hey, how do you like Patreon? We buy you get it. Link in bio. You know, goddamn. I'm not looking forward to this, but here we go.
Hey, welcome to today's podcast. It is no secret that Americans are fed up with the state of journalism. There's a recent Gallup poll that determined 7 in 10 Americans see bias in media and consider it, a problem. They think that journalists are actively trying to persuade people to adopt a position. I haven't noticed. At the same time, 8 in 10 Americans believe that journalism is important for democracy. It is. It's critical. But not the way it's being done now. Not like this. What we're seeing is activism that hides itself behind headlines. If there's any hope for the survival of journalism in America, we need more people like today's guest. He's maybe one of 5 people alive actually doing the job of a journalist. And of those 5, I would say he is one of the best and most daring, which means you're about to hear my discussion with the best journalist alive, or at least one of them. Maybe it will be remembered as the best journalist of our era. The proof
Did he make his shirt in Minecraft? That's a really good burn. Bravo.
proof of this is that corporate media has turned against him. One critic called him a bomb-throwing media critic. Andrew Ross Sorkin implied that he should be arrested. He says the things that make people uncomfortable.
In Roblox.
But that's what journalism is. And he makes people uncomfortable regardless of their politics. He's been reporting on politics for about 15 years now. If you remember the explosive series of articles in 2013 about Edward Snowden and the NSA released in The Guardian, that was him. Pulitzer Prize for his reporting on that. Pretty much the only Pulitzer Prize winning story that basically everyone knows about. He's since gone on to do incredible things. In 2014, he launched The Intercept because he was worried about rampant bias and censorship in the media. Now, how do I know this guy stands by his principles?
Okay, so we already, I'm going to skip ahead to the interview, but we already know what's kind of going to be going down. This is an hour and 20 minutes. I won't be watching the whole thing. We'll get a taste for it. But basically what's happened is Glenn Greenwald has become a very useful tool to the right, and the right specifically. And there's a reason that they've been constantly pushing him out, because he gets to give them that thing, right? It's a check mark. It's kind of like the same reason they like putting on Tulsi Gabbard and other people who outwardly will say, well, yes, I happen to be either on the left, or I'm a progressive, or I happen to be, finely attuned to this political ideology, but I happen to also agree with the thing that you want to talk about today. I happen to agree with the very topic you want to bring up, which is either going to be about cancel culture, trans kids, trans people in sports, well, trans women in sports, let's be real, and any one of these issues, and you're going to be able to talk about it, and then we're going to be able to tell everybody, hey, by the way, I'm a journalist myself. I bring on people from all walks of the political spectrum, and there's no biased reporting here. We've got Glenn Greenwald. I've got Glenn Greenwald and Tucker Carlson. They both come on the show. So there you go. There's a variety of ideas.
Times, or have been. We live in really confusing times, and you don't really ever know anybody's true intent until their back is up against the wall. And when I saw...
And yeah, it's so much worse in color. It's so much worse. It's like black and white was doing it a lot of favors. It really was, but yeah, I digress.
Your own company, the company that you started, The Intercept, and you came out against it and said, look, this is the same. This is the why I started this, to get away from this crap. And you left. I was really impressed when you would call out your own business. And the thing...
He looks like a motel pillow. Like, it's so distracting. That's all I can see.
That you have done, well, for a long time, but mainly recently in Brazil. What you've done is remarkable and very brave.
Thanks. With The Intercept, it was difficult. It wasn't fun to do that, because that was something that I had created with 2 of my closest friends in journalism, 2 journalists for whom I have a lot of respect at the height of the Snowden story, when we had a lot of leverage. And the idea was to create a media outlet that would give journalists complete journalistic freedom and editorial independence of a kind that I always wanted and worked to preserve for myself. The idea was to give it to other journalists. And so to have this media company to which I devoted so much of my energy and time, and that was important to me in terms of what I thought we were building and what it was going to stand for in journalism, turn around and kind of betray every single one of those values out of really nothing more than this petty fear that the people in their circles would accuse them of risking a Trump victory by doing their jobs and reporting on Joe Biden, which is kind of what happened to them in 2016 when we reported extensively on Hillary Clinton, and they spent 4 years being told, oh, you helped Trump win. They were petrified that that would happen again, and they were willing to throw everything overboard, including their basic function as journalists, in order to suppress the story. The thing that was the straw that broke the camel's back for me was about a week before telling me that my story didn't meet their
the facts. And when the facts didn't appear and everything was Nazi level, Hitler gas chamber level, they lost credibility. And they actually, it was the facts that drove me to say, okay, this is not true, and these guys are out to get him. But it actually pushed me to be a bigger supporter than I think I ever would have been, because they were so clearly out to get this guy. It was like, I've never seen anything like it.
Yeah. And, I found it to be a threat to democracy, because what actually happened was, whatever you think about Trump and Hillary in the 2016 election and whoever you wanted to win, there's no question that Trump won fair and square.
Right.
He got more electoral college votes, and under the Constitution became the legitimate president. And the reality is that many power centers in the United States simply never accepted that outcome because it wasn't the one they wanted, and they felt threatened by it. And so they devoted themselves to doing everything they could, first to preventing him from winning, and then subverting his presidency once he won, in ways that are really quite menacing to democracy. The whole Russiagate script came from the CIA, which, is not supposed to have any involvement in our domestic politics. And yet, because he was questioning things like the ongoing value of NATO, which was originally created to be a bulwark against a country that no longer exists, or the regime change operation in Syria, which was their highest priority, running against the Iraq War, talking about, the Pentagon getting weapon systems that we don't need in order to enrich lobbyists and Raytheon board of directors, all these things that were very threatening to real entrenched power centers in Washington, using this partnership that they've always had throughout the Cold War with the major media outlets. They just set out to destroy his presidency in a way that I found infinitely more menacing than whatever one might think about Donald Trump and the things that he was doing.
Oh my gosh. I mean, the way they use the FISA courts, and I mean, if you can set out and do this to the president of the United States, the regular Joe doesn't have a chance. Not a chance.
Glenn, I think about when I was on your show, the first time you and I spoke, when we met, I was in Texas. I think we spent most of the time talking about the Snowden reporting I did about the NSA. And obviously, that has been a cause of mine for a long time, is the danger posed by this enormous spying system. And when Edward Snowden decided to come forward after spending his life inside of these agencies, because he originally believed in them, he volunteered for the Iraq War, he worked for the CIA, he worked for the NSA, his father was in the Coast Guard. He was not a left-wing radical by any means. He donated money to Ron Paul. When he came forward, it was because he said, they're now turning this on the American people. This is no longer a weapon system being used against foreign adversaries. And, I do think that the scandal of the FBI getting caught lying to the FISA court in order to spy on a U.S. citizen, Carter Page, who even Robert Mueller concluded there was no evidence to suggest.
Yeah, see, the thing is, I agree with a lot of the things he says, especially when he talks about, Julian Assange, freedom of speech, stuff like that. The thing that bugs me is how he uses it. Like, a lot of the things he brings up are very factually correct, as are a lot of the reporting he does when it comes to, again, like anything he does on Latin America, Central America, stuff like that. It's usually pretty spot on reporting. But then it's the twist, right? Like, Glenn Beck knows exactly why he's on there. Glenn Beck is not a journalist. Glenn Beck is an opinion piece, right? And this all falls into, and so is Glenn Greenwald these days. He's an opinion piece, but he happens to be one on different platforms. That's where this all falls into. So they're directly using both their platforms and their messaging to push a narrative of which certain things are more dangerous than others, right? Like, at the end of the day, it's scarier to me that certain people would be involved in trying to push for Russiagate, for example, that had CIA ties or things of that nature, than it is anything that the president of the United States, Donald Trump, could have done under his tenure. He's also really been big lately trying to downplay the insurrection that took place on Capitol 6, as saying the police officer, which is factually true, again, by the way, that the police officer, the coroner's report shows that he did not in fact die from a stroke from the Capitol 6 events. He did not he didn't commit suicide, and that was deeply politicized, stuff of that nature. That aspect is true, but then to suggest that is somehow a media exaggeration, like this Glenn, I'm talking about Glenn Greenwald, that is somehow like the whole Capitol 6 January riot is from its inner core something that people just freaked out about, that it was over exaggerated at the end of the day. It's like that is a distinctly right-wing narrative. That's something they've been trying to do for a long time now. They've been trying to get people to not be as concerned, even though people have been warning everybody about this for a long time, like online culture, QAnon culture, the cult of personality, the way that Donald Trump is trying to coalesce power, things like that. And it's building towards moments like this.
Here's when the CIA was created and grew, and he
Correct.
had he had 15 minutes to warn the country on his way out about whatever he thought they should know. And he said, here's what I want to warn you about. There's this permanent faction that's entrenching itself, that's more powerful than elected officials, that is this military industrial complex that's infecting every hall of academia and every hall of power. And its influence is going to threaten democracy. This is before the Vietnam War, before 9/11, before the gigantic growth from both of those and throughout the decades. It's, if you don't recognize the existence of the deep state, and if you're not concerned about it, you know nothing about American politics and how power in the U.S. government functions.
I have to tell you, I thought the phrase, I was really uncomfortable at the beginning of deep state. It implies like a star chamber and everything else, where all you have to do is really go back and read Eisenhower. He talked about it's going to infest in the colleges and the universities. It's going to start funding projects where it's not really an honest question.
So what he should be talking about, if he's going to talk about Eisenhower and the deep state, we should be talking about the military industrial complex, because that's really, really one of the things that Dwight D. Eisenhower warned a lot of the Americans about, and how the power of the military industrial complex, again, under capitalism, was effectively going to destroy and dominate the control of the country itself. Sorry, I should say dominate rather than destroy. And that's effectively what does happen, right? A lot of those monstrously huge companies, your Raytheon, your Boeing, for example, the ones that are manufacturing very large amounts of arms, they are responsible for the majority of the world's global arms trade. They're made by these massive corporations. The thing that I don't like, though, is when you go down that road of being like, and it's the deep state trying to infect the schools, trying to infect the culture, trying to infect us all. We're more concerned with woke politics and canceling each other than we are about the people who actually control the world. That's the true fear that we have to think about here. This is where we're going to be talking about this.
It's a question to further their agenda. It will infiltrate everything and destroy everything. That's what it is. That's what it is. I'm afraid that we are now at a point to where Congress and the Senate and the White House, I think really on whoever gets in, I think Trump was just such a cannonball or a grenade that I think he was blowing things up that he didn't even know he was blowing up, Right. And so he was frightening to everybody. But I wonder now if with the way that the corporations are getting involved, and Glenn, I'm not a guy, I always used to think you'd watch, what was it, that movie with Harrison, Blade Runner. And, they'd say, oh, I work for the corporation. I'm like, stop it. I've always been a free market guy.
A capitalist.
The corporation, yeah. The free market is not free. These guys have embedded themselves with Congress, with the both political parties, with the media. We are headed.
It's inevitable. That's the problem, though, right? Like, that's the problem if you don't actually apply like a deeper analysis to any of this. Like, as long as people are producing vast amounts of wealth, they're accruing vast amounts of capital, they're accruing vast amounts of power, they're going to do things in their own self-interest to continue to accrue that power, wealth, and capital. So that's going to continue. What you're seeing is an eventuality. There's no such thing as a free market in the sense that you want it to be, right? There's not going to be, by definition, a free market that just emerges if we do the good kind of capitalism. But what we have now is crony capitalism. We have to separate those two things, right? There's crony capitalism and then there's this.
For an oligarchy, and I don't see a way out.
Well, this is...
What about the White Boy Summer Pledge? No played. I don't know what the White Boy Summer Pledge is. Was that one of the pledges? Well, then maybe that's the non-white side of me. Then that's my indigenous half.
This to me is you're absolutely right, and it's menacing and alarming. But I also see an opportunity here, and this has been part of one of the primary projects that I feel like I've been devoting myself to, which is what you just said. Find support on both the left and the right, which is very interesting, right? Because if the traditional division on economic debates between the right and left has always been people on the right, like yourself, like you just said, I support free market economics. I'm a capitalist. Corporations are not evil. They're just entities doing business, buying and selling, making profit. That's the engine of American life. And people on the left, and the government should stay out. People on the left wanted government intervention in the marketplace. We want government intervention to redistribute wealth on behalf of the poorest, on behalf of the most marginalized, because this inequality is too extreme. the debate. Neither model. We don't have free market economics. The government intervenes constantly.
We missed some. You glitched on us for a second. Can you go back to saying that? Yeah, go ahead.
So I was saying, those are the contours of traditional left-right economic debate. And what we have now is neither of those, right? We don't have free market economics. The government intervenes constantly in the economy. That's why corporations pay lobbyists, people who get out of Congress, and they enrich them to use their influence on their behalf. The government intervenes constantly, but they're not intervening on behalf of the poor. They're intervening on behalf of these gigantic corporations that have no allegiance to the United States. It's crony capitalism. It's not free market capitalism.
There you go.
Nor is it social.
You said the meme. You said the thing out loud that I was saying earlier. It was a matter of, what was that? Like fucking a minute? Yeah, it was a minute. It took a minute. There you go. It took about 1 minute. It's all right.
It's this kind of, it's what you said. It's oligarchy, and now that corporations are becoming even more overt and open.
It is. It absolutely is. That's the problem. There's so many slivers of absolute truth in here, in amongst all the other stuff. But like, what he wants to do is revert to this libertarian fantasy that we can just basically have this world in which we do not have monstrous corporations basically trying to infect our politics, our political system, our apparatuses, if you will, and then we just have people able to work hard and be rewarded based on their merits. Doesn't that sound amazing? It sounds like a beautiful system. Every single one of you has within you the ability to work hard, and if you choose to work hard, you will be rewarded, and if you choose not to, you don't get as many rewards, and that's the whole system. And then basically whether or not you get things like healthcare, food, shelter, education, well, that should all depend basically on your work ethic at the end of the day. There's not going to be any external factors that take into consequence here. And if you're saying that this is just an end result of crony capitalism, well, no, these kind of things seem to be inevitable.
About their willingness to become involved in what was always partisan disputes that they steadfastly avoided is really alarming, right? They used to always intervene in government and lawmaking processes for their own benefit. They would, have their lobbyists negotiate for a tax break that benefited their company, things in their self-interest. They're way beyond that now, right? They're now wanting to be the arbiters of how many protections we can have against voting fraud and when it spills into voter suppression, or what proper policing policy should be, things for which they have no competence, but their immense concentrated power enables them to throw their weight around in a way that democracy could easily be subverted.
Hey, how are you listening to this podcast right now?
Don't go 4 fingers deep before you record your ads, Glenn Beck. Come on, that's not. You're like, oh yeah, after a couple of Glenn Levitts, I'm gonna start. Hey, how did you like Patreon? Did we buy? You get it. Link in bio. God damn.
I think one of the most interesting things that has happened in the last couple of months, 3 months, is when Facebook and Twitter, basically all Silicon Valley platforms, united to remove the sitting president of the United States from the internet, to deny him the opportunity to communicate with hundreds of millions of people. The people who cheered that were American journalists, because paradoxically, journalists who are supposed to defend principles of free expression, free speech, and a free press are in fact the most progressive advocates for internet censorship. They're the ones who agitate for it. But the people who denounced it were world leaders, including many who have no love lost for Donald Trump, like Angela Merkel in Germany and Macron government in France, and even the president of Mexico, President Lopez Obrador, who said in a really eloquent press conference, what we're creating is this world government of these tech oligarchs answerable to nobody. And that's that's what Angela Merkel was saying too, was she was saying, look, here in Germany, we do believe in regulations on speech, but if you're going to have them, it has to be the democratic process that decides them, the lawmakers who are elected by the people. This is not that. This is unelected overlords, oligarchs deciding who can and cannot be heard. Even the most powerful elected leader in the and even they were alarmed by it.
They're having the same kind of internet problems. But that really speaks to the discussion that was being had a couple days ago, Like at the end of the day, if you want to return to some strange libertarian fantasy land in which, freedom reigns, and you want to go to fixing crony capitalism so that we can have the good kind of capitalism, operate and be virtuous, at the end of the day, neither of those systems is going to address the fundamental problem at the core of the businesses themselves, the relationship between the employer and the employee, right? There's still going to be a ruling class of people who own the factories, who own the jobs, who create the jobs or what have you, who own the wealth, who own the property and all that kind of stuff. And then there's going to be a subservient class who works for them and tries to climb up in this system that we have, but it sucks. The system's going to be terrible. And some people can. It's better than feudalism, certainly better than slavery, all right? Better than those previous economic systems. It's better than mercantile capitalism, that's for sure, right? People still can sometimes climb the ladder. There is some potential mobile ability, but the vast majority will not under the current system.
Well, of course. First of all, that's already being done in China, right? These kind of, numeric or quantitative evaluations of various citizens and then determining which rights they do and don't have. It's becoming increasingly digitized, so there are no humans making these decisions. It's all done algorithmically. And I think the China...
Nothing is better than sewer socialism. Sewer socialism reigns supreme. You know that. It's the ultimate form of socialism. It's within the sewers. They hang out with the turtles. And Splinter. Yeah.
It was so interesting because traditionally, when the United States decides who their adversaries are and who their allies are, the power centers in the United States, the military centers and high finance, are generally on the same page. So if, they want to sanction the Russians or the Iranians or the Venezuelans, Wall Street doesn't really mind.
And
the Pentagon's on board with it. In the case of China, you have military planners who see China as this adversary, but Wall Street and Silicon Valley are in bed with the Chinese. They're tied at the hip to them. And one of the things that's happening is that the Chinese model is competing with the American model for what is going to be hegemonic in the world. And it seems like that the Chinese model is prevailing, and they have really powerful partners in the United States. You see these, NBA stars and coaches and officials who get applauded because they're so brave because they recite liberal pieties about Black Lives Matter, and everyone says, "Oh, they're so brave." Wondering they're all going to ask them about Uyghur camps or and they suddenly clam up, and that shows you who their masters are, who's actually controlling. And I think that is one of the real dangers. Is not that China
I love that he's still trying to By the way, what are you trying to be, Mr. Frost? What is going on here? Mr. Freeze. Look at this. Chill. Your impending doom. The bluest of eyes. The blues are so oversaturated right now. It's unreal. Is he he's a White Walker. He's an actual White Walker. I can't believe this is happening. But anyways, he's doing his best to try and get through this, just being okay, we got some pretty scrappy audio right now, a little bit scuffed. But this is just, what a scene. How are you taking this seriously? I wouldn't be able to talk to this with a straight face.
US are going to have this kind of finance companies.
Oh, right, platforming, big platform. Got it. So there's a costume change that seems to have taken place between the first and the second scene. What happens there?
Hey, Glenn. It's Glenn. So that's what happened yesterday. And we decided that we would meet again today. And after I lost contact here with our studios 3 or 4 times today for some unknown reason, the hour approached and I didn't think it was going to happen.
So he did a costume change and he looks a little bit more respectable now, But at the same time, the blues, these blues, oh man, oversaturated.
Exercise the kind of influence they were accustomed to exercising.
It must have been the deep state. No, that was 100% the deep state. That was the deep state through and through, I mean, you think you live in a free and just society, and then all of a sudden you say that word out loud and your internet goes down. Yeah, just try it.
Washington, he was saying whenever we've had a problem in Washington in the past, we've had all these pass to be able to resolve them under Clinton, under Obama, even with Bush and Cheney.
What just happened?
To be able to resolve them under Clinton, under Obama, even with Bush and Cheney. And the problem with Trump is that he never really was embedded with support of Wall Street, and that was their path in. And with Biden, he was saying with great excitement that normalcy was going to be restored because they would now have influence to wield again in Washington through Wall Street.
So, Glenn, but isn't that exactly the opposite of what the American people want? I mean, say what you want about Donald Trump. He was a massive disruptor. But it seems as though that's kind of what America needs, is a real disruption of politics and business as usual. Everybody's gotten very comfortable at the high end.
He was a disruptor in the sense that he was woefully inept. There was that. He didn't put people in the positions he was supposed to. There was so many facets of the government that weren't operating functionally as he was enriching himself. But I mean, lots of people do that. But it was whole fuck ton of nepotism. Steve Bannon, Steve Miller, they got their tentacles in there. You had a lot of open and avowed people who are into white nationalism in forms of government. Is that what you're talking about? Why do they ignore this? That's the one part of this that I don't fully understand. If you're Glenn is, and I do say this, I do respect the journalism that he's done in his life, but how are you seeing this as such a blind spot? But the scariest thing to you is the quote unquote deep state.
And they say whatever they have to do to get elected. And then no matter which party it is, they follow the same path.
I think we're seeing that trend throughout the democratic world, actually, right? So the entire elite the neoliberal elite in the United Kingdom was warning everybody that Brexit would be this unmitigated disaster. And the voters said, we don't really care what you think. In fact, the fact that you're opposed to Brexit makes us think that it's likely something we ought to vote for. A lot of it was just spite voting out of anger. Here in Brazil, where I am and just wrote a book about, for 20 years, the country was a center-left government run by the Workers' Party. And then out of nowhere, this kind of far right.
There was a dramatic under-turnout for Brexit, by the way. Like the people, like it was a very small amount of people who voted for the majority of that country. It was really, really abysmal.
Authoritarian figure was elected to the presidency, Jair Bolsonaro. And the same thing happened in the US, where it was 8 years of Obama, and suddenly Trump got elected. And there were millions of Obama voters who voted for Trump, which makes no sense to, people who are political and media elites, because they can only see the world through this stunted left-right prism. But to those people, it makes a lot of sense. And what did all those people have in common? Brexit, Trump, Bolsonaro, even Obama when he ran in 2008.
Yes.
They were all claiming that they were going to be this outside force to come in and sort of burn the entire system down, which is what people want more than anything, more than any ideology.
So I think I know you are. You're exactly right. When Obama said, and I've never heard anybody else say this, when Obama said hope and change, I didn't like what I thought he was going to change it to, but I was all on board for hope and change. Transparency, cleaning up the swamp, doing all of that stuff. And then he never did any of it. He became the swamp. Donald Trump, I think, has still a lot of support because he never became one of the in people.
Okay. The only response that you could respond to that with, if you were in fact a journalist worth your salt, worth your lint, would be that is factually incorrect. What you've just said. The words that have come out of your mouth are wrong. And I would now like to state why. So I'm going to see what his response will be.
And so all of the people and I think this is happening all around the world, all the people who are not on the inner circle, they're not one of the experts, they're just one of the people whose voice was supposed to matter, want somebody like them, and they'll forgive.
Yeah, like Trump is the definition of an oligarch. He's an oligarch who got more power within government to give more money and power to oligarchs. There's no question about that. Like, please, Glenn, this is your one chance, Glenn. In Glenn versus Glenn, you can have a slight redemption arc right here if you just state out loud that what you just said is factually incorrect. I can point to the appointees that he made and prove to you that is not true.
Them for a ton, as long as they don't become one of the elites.
It's so amazing because, I lived in New York for 15 years through, starting in the early 1990s into the 2000s. And the persona of Donald Trump, he was a New Yorker pure. That's where he gained his fame. And the persona of Trump always was that he was this kid from Queens, which, rich Manhattanites and old money look at with great condescension at best. And there was always kind of this resentment on his part. That's why he would go into Manhattan and he would have to build the tallest building because he felt like he was excluded from high society Manhattan, which he was.
Correct.
They looked at him as like this kind of,
Clown.
ruffian. Exactly. They really looked down there.
He was a fucking outsider. Is that what's happening in front of wow. I didn't know he had gone this far. He's completely off. He's completely off his rocker. There's no walking that back, Again, the only response you could have to that is just completely factually incorrect. But then, no. Now's a good time to tell you my diatribe about how Donald Trump was just a misunderstood outsider, Oh, poor little rich Trump from his rich little family with his rich little millions from daddy in his rich little construction business that disproportionately didn't allow black families to rent. Oh my, yes. He truly comes from the streets. Hey, do you like movies? Do you like Serfs? Do you want movies and Serfs watching the movies? So then come over to the new channels. It's the Serfs cinema. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. Can you do the thing, that thumbs up and comment and all those things that help us out in the algorithm that controls every aspect of our lives? Also, if you happen to have a Facebook account, can you delete it? Like just delete it. You should probably delete your Facebook account because it's not a great company. But hey, if you can't do that for whatever reason, I understand. And could you also go to facebook.com/thesurftimes then and give us a little like and a follow. We're just trying to push back against the fact that people like Ben Shapiro happen to dominate the platform entirely. And when everyone asks, why do older generations believe the things they believe? One of the problems is the majority of them on social media use Facebook. So to counter that, we're just going to be on there too now. Also, if you happen to have a union or a worker co-op or even a leftist project, podcast, website, Zoom, MySpace, it doesn't matter. We will advertise it for free on this channel. All you got to do is go to weareserfs.com and use the forms that we got there, weareserfs.com. Thanks, everybody.
To our gods, I'm Raft and Xander Corvus. We shall build golden idols in your honor. To our monarch, Tom Spiker. Our soft, spongy flesh is yours to command. To our lords, Evan Nudie, Trevor R., Alexander Thaler, Ryan Lubin, Bisexual Black Gamer, Toe Fox, and Jeffrey Lamb, we proudly carry your sigils onto the battlefield. And to our Knights of the Round Table, Riley and Anna, Poodlehawk, Multi Mondi, Timothy Hart, Trevor Janis, Lemmy 101, Anthropophagic, Saren 42, Chronic to Hemphog, Callie Kotka, The Great Pudini, Von Janney, Catherine, Radical Maniac, Ramon Acosta, Encosin, J. Fraser Cartwright, Jimmy Bignuts, Violent Orchard, Sophie Baby, Political Puppy, Andreas Chiringuito, Zach Christensen, Nicholas Marks, Jopi, Josh Mickelson, Melissa Murphy, Todd Buckingham, Todd Lajeunesse, and Constance Joyce Lacheris. We tip our cap and lift our mug and salute you.